Right now on the line with us, a very special guest, Sandra Champlain. She is the author of the book, We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. Hey, Sandra, how are you?
Oh, hi, Eric. I'm great. Happy to be here.
Well, happy to have you. And so Sandra, you say in the book title, you refer to yourself as a skeptic. Could you elaborate on that a little bit and maybe say, at one point in your life, what type of skeptic you were and how that kind of factors in?
Oh, sure. But if I can back up a little and just comment on that poor little kid that got a note instead of Halloween candy.
Oh, you're referring to the Suburban Mother who gave out notes to the obese children.
Oh, yeah. So this ties into your question because I think as little kids that we live this happy-go-lucky life. Everything's great. We can be the president. We can be an airline pilot. We can be a veterinarian. And then something happens. And so for this kid, he gets a note when everybody else gets candy. Those moments when we were a kid and something goes wrong, I personally got lost at Disneyland, but suddenly something happens. This little voice kicks in our heads, like the little kid might say, I'm not good enough, I don't get candy, something's wrong with me, and me getting lost at Disney might be like, they didn't lose my brother and sister, I must be unlovable. And as basic as this might sound, I think you and our listeners know that we all have this little voice inside of our heads that constantly has us be fearful. It questions, are we good enough? Am I lovable? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
definitely. Inner critic. Yeah, and I think it's formed, so whoever this poor kid is or these kids that didn't get the candy, it started them off right there. And so my skepticism, I think, came from just a lifetime of maybe believing what my parents had to say. There are times, well, I don't even want to get into the holiday times with Christmas and Santa because I don't know your whole listener base, but there are times that we trust and then come to find out something we believed in might not be so. So I believed what I learned in school. I believed what I learned from my parents. Growing up, I thought anybody who believed in the world of the supernatural was a lunatic. I heard you say you're 45. I'm 47. And back when we were kids, there wasn't a lot of talk about mediums and psychics, and there was no ghost whisperer on TV. So to say I was a skeptic, it's like if I couldn't believe something or if I didn't know it to be true, then it wasn't true. So I had a fear of dying, which ultimately was behind me researching this topic. I mean, it was so strong, looking up at the stars. Who am I? What is my life for? What happens when I disappear? I'd lost my grandfather. I'd lost some pets. I was at a lousy point in my life. And so just starting this journey of, like, what can I believe in? What can I get my my hands around that's real? And not believing in this whole world of, mediums and psychics and astrology and that.
So when you were growing up, did you was your family affiliated with any organized religion at all, or were you kind of apart from that?
Yeah, we were Catholic. Went to Catholic school just about every year of my life. Went to Sunday school. Went to church, but just faith was not enough. Sounded good, but it didn't rest my fear.
And so, kind of, if you could explain the process of, I guess, the reawakening or your discovery that there was something after death.
Yeah, I can. First of all, I kept very secret about it because I was very vocal when I'd hear somebody was involved in any of these occult studies, thought they were lunatics and they should get a life. Pretty much, I'd go through Barnes & Noble and I'd see the spiritual section and I would just laugh. So when I started this journey, I certainly wasn't going to tell anybody. And I had the opportunity to see a show of a medium. And I just went for entertainment, not for any real value other than it'd be something fun to do. And the medium had told different people in the audience very specifically who their loved ones were around them, what they died of, and there's always some profound message that comes. And so I was listening to the show for entertainment, but I was also astounded that this medium was so accurate. but also then the skeptic kicks in and says, well, there's got to be some kind of, these people must be in the audience as plants. There's going to be something they try to sell us on at the end. And there never was, Eric. So the skeptic in me was looking for why, but the person that was so petrified of death was like, what if there is something to this? So very secretively, I flew to Laguna Beach, California. I live in Massachusetts. That's where I am right now, just north of Boston. And I flew to Laguna Beach, California, and I took this weekend course with Doreen Virtue is her name. Very, very famous medium. She talks about the angels a lot. And it was a private course, and she said, if you are someone who is drawn to being there, you are somebody who can accurately tell the deceased around loved ones. So that inner voice in my mind is like, there's no freaking way. And if it is true, it certainly is not going to happen to me. It happens to other people. So I paid money I couldn't afford to spend. I went just because there was that 1% chance that maybe, possibly this was real. And the story I'm going to tell next still gives me goosebumps if I can tell you what happened. And this was the first thing that happened that opened my eyes, like there really is something to this. Do you need to ask me a question before I go on?
No, please. No, you're doing great. Please go on.
I have a habit of just talking, so just feel free to jump in. Okay, so there was only 20 of us in this course, and the instructor said, everybody grab a partner. So I've never seen anybody in this room, and so I take this lady, and she said, sit knee to knee, hold hands, close your eyes, imagine that there's this kind of invisible ray of energy that connects your hearts. And she says, we're not really going to do a medium reading now because you're not trained, but we're just going to demonstrate how one is done. So by her saying that, it took all the fear away because I'm no medium, and this isn't going to work. So I'm glad we aren't really doing it. And she said, just create, imagine there's a person standing behind your partner, and just simply tell a story. If you really could see somebody, what would they look like? Just make it up. She said, anything you can see about them, maybe if you hear a name, just anything at all. And there's usually some profound message that comes at the end. So I didn't have any fear of doing this because she told me 100% just use my imagination. And my day job is I'm a chef, so I'm pretty creative. And I did just that. So I have my eyes closed. I'm holding this woman's hands, and I'm imagining this invisible beam of light. And so I just decide to create a man standing behind her. And I tell her it's her grandfather on her mom's side. And his name is Jan. That's a name that came into my mind. He was a fisherman in Denmark. I saw a fishing boat, and I don't know where the name Denmark came from, but it showed up in my imagination. And I said he had sandy blonde hair, kind of long. He had big gap between his front teeth, really windburned skin. I said he died of lung cancer, and he wants you to tell your mom that he loves her. And he never was able to verbalize that when he was on Earth, but he loves her deeply. So I opened my eyes okay, it's your turn to go. And the woman had these streams of tears coming down her face. Her grandfather on her mom's side, his name was Jan. He was a fisherman in Denmark. He fit the description. He had died of lung cancer, and she knew that he had never told her mom verbally that he loved her. And this came out of my mouth, my imagination, me the skeptic.
And from your perspective, it was just, you were just creating it at the moment.
Absolutely. And I've learned after the fact that so many people see deceased loved ones in their dreams and have them in their imagination. Even the most famous psychics and mediums, it just comes across as our imagination. So beware, what you think might be your imagination may really be messages from your loved ones.
So you get this realization, and at that point, does kind of your world outlook change?
Yeah. It was a oh my gosh experience, which I said something else actually. But it wasn't enough because now it just kind of opened the can of worms. I have to find out what else, because I know from my past. When we grieve the loss of a loved one, it hurts really bad, probably worse than any other kind of physical pain is this emotional pain of grief. And I thought, if I could share this with people, it could really ease people's pain. Because over the course of that weekend, I didn't do it just once. I did it quite a few times that I was telling people their deceased loved ones, and they were telling me about mine accurately, but not 100% of the time, only about maybe 30 to 40%, because the rest of the time was my imagination. So I really knew that if, first of all, if I told anybody about it, they'd laugh, or they'd say, well, who do you see around me? And then I'd get it wrong, and they'd say, they'd put me in that category that I put all the other lunatics who believed in this stuff. So it wasn't worth it for me to share at that time. So I continued to look, and and in the beginning of We Don't Die is my journey of all the people and all the experiments and all the things that I did, because even people, we hear about near-death experiences a lot, and yes, people go to the light and they see a white light and hear great music, and maybe some, hovering over the hospital room. And our skeptical mind, the inner critic that we have, really wants to say, well, that's not possible. That's just our brain shutting down. That's what happened. Well, when we take the time to go even further than like other people that we listen to and do some research, Dr. Raymond Moody has studied hundreds of thousands of people who have had near-death experiences with very similar stories. Dr. Ken Ring took near-death experiences one step further, and he studied people that have been blind since birth and have never seen. And in that in-between phase, when they flatline, not only are they hovering above their bed, but very accurately they could tell colors that people were wearing. One woman could see her husband talking to a doctor, and the doctor's pen fell out of his pocket, and the husband picked it up, handed it back to the doctor. The husband was wearing a green shirt, all very specific things of people that have never had vision. So how's that possible? There's a psychologist who works with the VA hospital, or he used to anyways, and our veterans who have had post-traumatic stress disorder. The VA hospitals as a whole have a great technique called EMDR, which is a eye movement desensitization reprocessing, it's called, and it's a series of left right eye movements that it dislodges somehow these veterans' painful emotions with the memory of whatever they experienced in war. And it works, and VA hospitals all over are using it. Well, this guy accidentally gave one of his patients a little extra on the left, right, following a pen back and forth. It didn't damage him by any means, but what it did is it put the patient, into almost another realm that the patient was now telling Dr. Botkin precisely who Dr. Botkin's deceased loved ones were.
So it was almost like the technique, the treatment,
right,
when given in a larger dosage, actually generated this same effect.
Yes, and now Dr. Botkin, eternal skeptic, didn't believe in life after death at all, but he decided to play with this on other patients, and sure enough, the same thing has happened. So Dr. Botkin has now created worldwide something called induced after-death communication, and not so much as a medium technique to get people in touch with loved ones, but it really conquers grief. It conquers the pain and suffering. Our bodies are always going to experience pain of grief because that's just what happens when we lose a loved one. But to have this knowing that the person isn't gone, and the faith that we will see them again, it's amazing. Healing.
Did you glean any idea as to what happens to people kind of in that after-death realm? Is it something that does correspond with things that the religions tell us, or is it something different than that? Is it something greater than that? Any idea as to what that might be?
Yeah, here's the good news, is that, I was petrified that I was somehow going against my religion, searching for near life after death. proof. And like I said, I'm only scratching the surface because there's like 10 other investigative things that I researched. But nothing to fear. The top 10 religions in the world that billions of people follow all believe in life after death. And so I was able to find that amongst everybody, there's this core belief, facts, whatever, and they coincide really well with everything I learned about people that have had the near-death experiences and things. And I very playfully say this because this is the easiest way for me to get it. I don't use big words or anything. I like to put things in basic terms. But I believe that we are here on Earth as souls, if you want to call us that come into the human form. This is the only place that we have the five senses. But we're here to learn, we're here to love, we're here to explore. You know, there's good emotions, there's bad emotions. I mean, it's the place that our soul can learn and grow. And if you want to call it heaven or the hereafter, you know, I playfully say it's this great place amongst the clouds where there's all good all the time. And the problem with that is anybody knows, like, if you're only given a certain food, say, Eric, what's your favorite food? Can I ask you?
Well, it's got to be pizza, which I think most people would agree with.
Okay, pizza. Yeah, pizza's great. So I say this playfully again, but if you had only pizza to eat for the rest of eternity, now in the beginning, be like, yeah, pizza. But then towards the end, it's like pizza just becomes boring. And so to come to this place called Earth, well, there's not pizza. There's just all kinds of things. You know, you got hamburgers and, you know, whatever. And so I believe that Earth is this place that we come to learn and grow and everything. And then after we die, the body dies anyways, our souls, we live on. And the next phase, I believe, is kind of a regrouping. You know, well, did we learn what we were here to learn? What else do we want to learn? Look, you know, this life review that everybody talks about. It's not just looking back on our life and seeing, you know, did we pass or did we fail? Did we learn? But many, many, many people share the belief who have had these near-death experiences that we experience the review from the people that we impacted. So if I'm having my life review right now, I'm actually sitting in your shoes, you know, on the other side of this radio interview. Like, did I inspire you? You know, that sort of thing. And that's pretty cool. And I want to just give you something else, too, because it's a question I get all the time is, where is heaven? You know, is it a place in the clouds? And I studied a bit with physics and quantum mechanics, and we always hear that we're made up of energy. And if we look at our hand, you know, we see a hand, yeah, but we're made up of molecules, and inside those molecules are atoms. Well, inside the atoms, if we were to put a really teeny tiny camera, the only thing it would pick up, well, it wouldn't pick up anything. There would be nothing. There would be no matter. All that's in there is energy. So we are, and this is not hocus pocus or in the world of the occult, but we really are made up of energy. Everything we see is made up of energy. Now, around you and around me is things like radio waves, the wireless internet, television signals, invisible to our eyes, but very real. And science has proved that energy can exist the same place as other energy. So you and I are not connected by any way except for like a telephone and radio waves right now. Yet our bodies are existing as well. So energy on top of energy can coexist. And this is my belief, is that our deceased loved ones, yes, they've changed forms, their body's no longer here, but the energy still hovers about in that same invisible place. And so that's why when we quiet our mind, and that's unfortunately the only way we have to connect with them, is when we can stop that inner voice from talking. When we can quiet our mind, we can have access to what may seem like our imagination, but could very well be our deceased loved ones.
And we're talking with Sandra Champlain, author of the book We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And we only have a few moments left, but I did want to ask you this question. And you touched on the grieving process a little bit. and I have to ask you, so you say that nearly half of sibling relationships end after the parent passes away. Why is that?
Well, it's not just that. Even over 90% of people get divorced if one gets a news of a life-threatening illness, or 80% of couples split if a child dies. Grief puts us in a state that's very much like an alcoholic or a drug addict that no longer gets their fix. It's a withdrawal, and it's like when we love someone, or even we grieve when we lose a job or lose our finances or health. The brain has to go through this withdrawal, and it's a mess. I mean, we're a mess. We don't realize it because many of us have not experienced it, but we actually lose some of the chemicals in our brain. And why all this separation occurs, I believe, in all these fighting, because you hear about these fights and people fighting over the will and things, is our brains aren't healthy. We're working with only about 10% of these chemicals that normally we have 100%. And so these chemicals that we don't have control our moods. That's why all the anger, they enrage. They control our memory and our perception. So those of us who have experienced grief know, like, it's impossible to remember where you put the car keys or your cell phone. It's impossible to remember, did I already have that conversation, or did I just think I did? And the problem with the perception is, if you and I were siblings and we were talking about something, you could be storing our conversation one way, and I could be storing it another way. A grieving brain just can't handle information that is given. Unfortunately, we're thinking we're 100% normal, so huge miscommunications take place that just end up having mega fights, and can very often, people are writing off of each other. So losing my dad, having those arguments with my siblings, learning how much grief impairs us. And, I want to give this to your listeners, and I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I created a website called survivegrief.com, and I posted an audio called How to Survive Grief, and I put, this is long before the book came out, different things that I knew would help people through grief as they helped me, and the understanding. And within just a few months, Eric, I had just posted on Facebook, just to my friends. It went semi-viral, meaning 3,000 people in 15 countries listened, and I started getting emails about how it eased pain, gave hope, helped people communicate during a loss. And then the biggest thing I got is people reported that they chose not to kill themselves, because grief can bring you to a level of depression that's really low. And so I got enough of those emails in that I said, you know what, I have to write a book on this. I don't want to be known as the grief lady. That's not who I am. I'm very much about life. But if I can be courageous and not care if people laugh at me, create We Don't Die, a skeptic's discovery of life after death, tell my journey, have one chapter about grief, and then the rest is how to have a really powerful life while we're here on Earth, and go after our dreams and achieve things that you might not have thought you could. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. I have about a million other questions, but unfortunately we don't have time. But the book is We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death, available where books are sold. I saw on Amazon, Sandra, that very highly reviewed. So congratulations on that.
#1 in the grief category, and I hit #4 as top motivational book, just under Dr. Phil, so that was pretty big. And also your listeners can go to WeDon'tDie.com, and my email address is there, and I'm definitely an open book if people need to communicate or have questions.
Great. Well, thanks for talking with us, Sandra.
You're welcome.